It's a great day for a protest. Nice sunny day, bright blue sky. Lots of good drummers, some music. I'm EDIE Lush, and I'm here at the Hub Pavilion in Copenhagen, and we're delighted to be joined by Dana Fisher. She's a professor of sociology at Columbia University, and you've been studying protesters at climate change summits for quite a while now. So tell me what you saw out there among the protesters today.
Well, today there was an amazingly diverse group of people out to protest. They were grandmothers. There were people who actually told me they started out protesting in the 70s and were involved in the peace movement. There were people who started protesting in the anti-war movement more recently. And then I talked to a couple people who have never protested before, and today was their first time out.
That's interesting. So is that unusual to see first-timers and these kind of things?
At protest events generally, that's not very unique, but at climate change protests, it tends to be that you have the NGOs who are affiliated with the negotiation come out and protest outside, and that's who makes up the majority of the protesting population. Today, however, that's not the case. And from my sense of being around the negotiations and around Copenhagen, it seems like there are a lot of people here specifically to protest. And there are a couple of reasons for that. The first reason is that this negotiation has gotten a lot more attention than most of them do. Even COP6, which was the negotiation that was supposed to finalize the Kyoto Protocol, didn't get the kind of attention that they've gotten here today. In addition to that, it's the 10-year anniversary of the WTO protests in Seattle, which we call the battle in Seattle.
Right.
And because of that, there's been this new climate justice movement that has formed, which is bringing together the themes of the global justice movement along with the climate change activists. And they're working together, and they're using a lot of the themes and what we call, the tactics that are used by the broader global justice movement. So there's discussion about shutting down the negotiations on Wednesday, for example.
Do you think that's likely? Do you think the protesters can have that kind of effect?
They're going to try. There's no question they're going to try, and there's no question that the police have been prepared for it. So it's going to be a battle of wills, or I think that they have a lot of innovative plans. Now, the negotiations have decided that they will not allow people in without 2 forms of negotiation ID starting Tuesday, because they're concerned about the protesters getting in and taking over. Because what will happen is these people will come in with observer, probably badges, and then they'll do their thing. There already was disruption yesterday where some protesters came in and hung a banner and stopped negotiation for a while. And the idea is that they're going to use some sort of innovative tactics in some sort of sneaky ways to get in and then shut down the negotiations on Wednesday for the whole day. I do not know of a history ever of protesters storming the negotiations like they're planning for Wednesday.
There's a very wide view that not everything is being addressed, and the economic view, the political view that's being taken inside the Bella Center by the leaders isn't enough.
Well, I think that in a lot of ways, the perspective of the global justice or the climate justice activists is consistent with the more developing of the developing nations. Particularly Tuvalu, and there actually has been engagement between the activists and people from Tuvalu and the negotiating team from Tuvalu, and basically the whole AUSIS, which is the Alliance of Small Island States. Their perspective is very consistent with that of the global justice movement. That's not to say that the negotiators from those countries would want the negotiation to be shut down, although there are rumors of their walking out if things continue as they have been going. Storming the negotiations probably will have no effect whatsoever, except for to delay negotiations, perhaps delay the ministerial, maybe mean that, that may mean that a number of the world leaders who come in won't be able to actually participate. And a lot of Secret Service may be concerned about the safety of people going in if these kinds of things happen.
What's been interesting to study the climate change protests versus other protests that you've studied?
What's so interesting is that the protesters, you can see how these tactics are diffusing from one movement and one focus group to another. So this whole incorporation of the justice movement into the climate activism is very new. And it's really exciting as a scholar who studies this, because first of all, we see a lot more of this kind of spectacle within the protests. And so you saw today, there were polar bears, there were people dressed in strange suits, there were even the people who were taking on the Billionaires for Bush type of model, I don't know if you saw them, who were dressed in evening attire and walking through in this kind of street theater model. And that's new. And they have been polar bears for a long time, but it's changing a lot. But this other idea of trying to shut down the negotiations is completely new. And if they're successful in getting a core group of people, and they've had this website up called Climate Camp, where they're trying to get anybody who's interested in direct action to go through this site and register and connect to one another. If they're actually successful in then getting a huge group of people together to march on the negotiations and try to shut it down, that'll be completely new. In recent years, these movements have started to take it to the internet, so that all of a sudden there'll be websites coordinating a day of action. Like today, they had a website that coordinated not just the action here in Denmark, but they also coordinated actions in 170 some countries. You can sign up through Twitter and be able to track what's going on. So the media is taking protest in a completely new direction. And it's also enhancing protest because all of a sudden they can coordinate people and say, for example, the police are in this location, let's go to another place.
Right.
Or the police are all of a sudden checking bags, don't go there.
But equally, can't the police be following these as well and change their actions?
Certainly. I mean, I imagine that the police are tracking what's going on Twitter. Now the question is whether they're only tracking the formal sites or they're going to track people who pull off of Twitter from the main feed and start to communicate amongst one another.
Dana Fisher from Columbia, thanks very much for coming along to the Hub Pavilion here in Copenhagen.
Thank you.
EDIE LUSH.